the Director of Christian Outreach and Engagement for the Combat Antisemitism Movement, EJ Kimball. EJ, happy to have you with us. I guess I should ask EJ, have you ever been to the Masters before we get into our conversation?
Well, I was going to say I wish that we were doing this from the Masters. I have never been there, and I do like to get out and play golf, but I would say it's more of a hack job than playing golf.
No, look, same here. Yeah, I love the game, but I'm horrible at the game. But certainly, it's one of those quintessential, American traditions, and we're big fans of the Masters and Augusta National. EJ, I'm glad that you guys are really bringing this very disturbing issue to the forefront, and this is something that we need to have a national conversation about.
That's true, and that's why the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement was actually founded. We're a little over 7 years old as an organization, but that's not to say that this issue of anti-Semitism is only 7 years old. It's been going on for thousands of years, and there's been organizations trying to fight this for decades. The problem is, as you just mentioned, it's metastasizing. It is constantly changing. And if you're fighting the old style of anti Semitism, you're missing out on what's coming up and what's happening now. And that's why we were created, is to pioneer these global efforts to combat Jew hatred. And it doesn't matter where it comes from the left, from the right, from within elements of the Islamic world. We're going to call it out. We're going to deal with it and work on solutions to fight it.
I am an evangelical Christian, and in my faith tradition as a Southern Baptist, we were always taught in church and Sunday school about the relationship of this country and Christians especially, and Israel. And so, a lot of my support for Israel is rooted in faith. And yet, here lately, even people like Mike Huckabee and Franklin Graham and other pastors are now coming under fire, and it's really this ugliness that has, maybe it's been there all along and we just didn't see it, but that's really disturbing to me.
It's very disturbing, and that's why my role with the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement is so important, because we have to work with our Christian friends and understand the challenges that are going on within your communities as well. Because this issue of anti-Semitism has really exploded, especially since October 7th, 2023. And what we have seen is that it's not just going after Jews, it's going after anyone that supports the state of Israel. And that's where evangelical Christians have been targeted. We've seen Christian services on Easter be targeted. We've seen Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting be targeted by protesters. We've even seen a crazed gunman, I believe it was in December 2024, shot up a Christian school in Northern California because of the, quote, US support for genocide in Gaza. And that targeted Christians, not Jews. And that's because of the support for Israel.
Well, look, I think they're coming after, I always tell people, you better wake up because the Islamists, they want to kill the Christians and they want to kill the Jews, not necessarily in that order. And LGBT folks, you better wake up because they're coming after you as well. But that's another conversation. Dealing with anti-Semitism here in this country, when you look at what happened a couple of years ago in the latter years of the Biden administration, where so many of these university campuses were under siege, and Jewish students were literally running for their lives. And EJ, I kept thinking to myself, why isn't even the Democrat Party, why aren't they out there in force saying, stop this now? It made no sense to me.
Well, this is something that's been going on for years, and I used to talk about the problems on college campuses, and yeah, there were always excuses. It's about free speech. When a conservative would come on campus, when an Israeli former IDF soldier would come on campus, an Israeli official would come on campus, and protesters would shout them down to the point that they couldn't even speak, and it was always being defended as this is free speech, but this wasn't about free speech. This was about shouting down and really blanket anti-Semitism and fascism going on these campuses. And so what
Yeah.
happened was, after years of letting this just play out and sweep it under the rug. October 7th happened, but that wasn't the biggest trigger of this. It was October 8th when we saw this explode on college campuses, that anyone who looked at this logically said, this is not spontaneous. You could not spontaneously be criticizing Israel less than 24 hours after that horrific massacre. This is something that has been prepared for years, and there are those that were being activated to push this message, and unfortunately, use useful idiots on college campuses that, in many cases, had no idea what they were even chanting for.
And using also idiots and what I call podcastistan. These people, I think they fooled a lot of folks, and now all of a sudden, that we're getting to see these people for who they really are. I want to talk about the global coalition that you guys have built here. I mean, it is truly remarkable. And by the way, folks, the website combatantisemitism.org. That's combatantisemitism.org. I mean, first of all, 25,000 incidents reported. That is just, it's an unacceptable number, but thank God people are getting engaged.
Yeah, and those are incidents that we've been able to find based on what's been reported. And there's so many instances that go unreported. I've experienced things myself, but when you're working in this space, you brush it off. Someone rolls down their window as someone's walking to synagogue and yells, you dirty Jew or something. Most Jews aren't going to report that, because it's almost like that's the cost of doing business in America now. And and so a lot of things aren't even reported, but even just looking at the numbers as they continue to rise, it is so vitally important that we don't view this as just a Jewish problem. It's a societal problem. And that's why we we work on this issue, not just at the national level. And yes, we'll work in Congress and governments around the world, but we're working at the local level. We're working with mayors, because what's happening on the streets is vitally important, because if you can stop it there, then you don't even have to worry about the federal government's involvement, because then it's not an issue. And even if in a certain in a certain community there may not be any anti-Semitism today, you've still got to be prepared, because tomorrow it may show up, and if you're not ready for it, it's going to take over.
No, well, you're absolutely right about that. And that's why I think it's so vitally important to understand we are in this and we have to be in this together. And I remember when I lived in New York City, I lived in New York for about 15 years, EJ, in a Brooklyn area. And I was like, I think I was the only non-Jewish person in the neighborhood. And I got to volunteer. On Sabbath, I got to volunteer to help my neighbors. They weren't able to push a button or do things like that. And that was really, it was an honor, but it was also an honor to be a part of the culture and really came to respect, that community in Brooklyn, New York. And again, it is so vitally important for us to stand together, Christians and Jews together on this issue.
It is vitally important, and we have to have an understanding of what this relationship means, and the history of Judaism and Christianity. And that's why back in November, we the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement with the ICEJ USA branch, we did a conference in Orlando, bringing together 300 young future Christian leaders so that they could understand what the issues are, what the challenges are, and how to combat it, and then also to recognize it within their communities. And so they learned
Mm.
the Jewish issues going on, and also in the Christian space, replacement theology, these podcasts that are going out there that are, anything that's not going well in society, it's either the Jews' fault or it's the Jewish state's fault. And that has really been a boon to help a younger generation that's getting tons of misinformation and disinformation to be able to wade through it and understand what the truth is, but more importantly, to be able to go out there and talk about it.
Yeah.
Because if they're not able to spread it to others, then we're not going to solve this problem.
All right, EJ, we're going to have to leave it there, my friend. And we'd love to get you back on to talk about more specific issues. But again, folks, you can go to combatantisemitism.org. That's combatantisemitism.org, and you'll be able to find out about the incredible work that EJ and the team are doing. EJ, welcome to the show, and we look forward to getting you back very soon.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.